So this is a pair of Louis Vuitton shoes. These have been chewed badly by a dog. So the first sort of step in the process is to get all the gluing done, to glue everything back into position. Obviously we first of all cleaned them down, and then obviously we began the sort of slow process of getting everything glued back into a position where that it was stable on the rear of this particular shoe. So we obviously used a water-based glue to fix all this down, and then we obviously had to allow this to sort of fully dry and cure properly. But it was a matter of a process of going through applying the glue into different areas and positions, and once we've got all the sort of glue in there with the sort of filling that we were doing as well, we had to sort of tape everything up so that it held things in position while it sort of fully cured and dried properly. That was sort of one of the hardest parts, was getting everything sort of held into that position while it dried. So obviously, getting the back straight was key to success here with this particular restoration, and trying to get it held in position. Once we've got the sort of glue initially set a little bit, we could get all the tape on there to help obviously hold it in position while it dried as well. So I mean, it's certainly not an easy task to sort of repair something like this, because it was literally hanging on by a thread. And we were actually doing these sat at SEMA 2023. We had very little tools and equipment with us to sort of carry out this job, but we carried out the job to the best of our ability, to be fair, and that was all that we could really do. So we're now going to apply the tape a little bit at a time. As you can clearly see, we've got to get small sections on here, holding it in position. We've allowed it to dry a little bit, and then all we can do is get the whole thing taped up and pulled over into position. So as we're sort of taping it, we've got to make sure that we're not actually disturbing what we've done. And where we've sort of got it taped, we can then start to apply more glue to give it strength to what we're actually trying to achieve here. That's one of the hardest parts, is getting the strength to this. Luckily, it's not on an area where you've got the LV pattern, so that's something with these Louis Vuitton shoes. We're using blue detailers masking tape on these at the moment to get them masked up, which is what we're trying to do. And now I'm just applying a little bit more glue onto the back end there where it literally was hanging on by a thread. So I mean, we were very lucky it wasn't chewed off completely, or else they would have been completely ruined. So it was a matter of getting plenty of glue on all different areas around the shoe to sort of give it strength. And we're trying to sort of, as we're putting the tape on as well, we're sort of trying to get it pulled around it so that it keeps the main structure body of the shoes intact, so that it doesn't change the shape as well. So that's obviously the hard part. So we're having to sort of go around the back, up and over the top, trying to keep that structure there perfectly in place on these as we're sort of putting the detailer's tape on. The reason why we use this type of tape is it's a low tack tape, so it's not going to actually create any problems when we peel it off or anything like that. With it being low tack, it's not going to transfer glue, residue from the back of the tape as well. So I mean, it makes it quite good. So just we're getting plenty of tape on here, and it's just trying to retain its shape is what we're actually trying to achieve with it. It's to keep that sort of structure there. As you can see, it's all there. So now we've got to very carefully peel this off, because obviously the next sort of stage is we've got to look at how it is. We may have to do some sanding. We may go straight on to the filler process, depending on the result that we've got here with these shoes. So it's just a matter of sort of carefully removing all of the masking tape off the shoe without sort of damaging the actual glued section itself. we had quite a fair bit on there, to be fair, but I mean, it was the only way we could sort of do it to hold it, you know, perfectly to shape, so that we could then start applying the heavy filler to the shoes. And we obviously, you know, we're going to use, if we do go down that route of the heavy filler, we're going to use a coloured heavy filler. Obviously, with it being black, we will use a black heavy filler. Luckily, we have some of that with us. So the next stage that we're going to be looking at with them, obviously we've got to make sure that it is fully secure before we go on to sort of start doing any sanding or filling or anything like that. So I mean, that's obviously got to make sure that it is very secure and that it is going to withstand the sort of filling and then obviously all the sanding process that we're going to do. So the next stage is to sort of do a little bit of cleaning with them, because we are obviously going to clean up the shoes as well, so we wanted to get them cleaned up as best as we possibly could. So we're starting to clean up the actual white side sort of sole area here, and it made a huge difference cleaning them through. The dirt coming off was actually quite remarkable, to be fair. So it's a matter of just going through, you know, getting them all cleaned up. I mean, the white can get quite stained quite easily and quite quickly, so we've just got to go through and give them a real good clean and scrub up on both of the shoes, which is what we're going to be doing, and wiping that through to sort of clean them up fully. But they were quite mucky. The only thing we didn't have was something to get right into the LV name sort of stamped on the side of these shoes. The only thing we didn't have was to get right into those, unfortunately. As you can see, there's plenty of dirt coming off there, and it's certainly going to make such a huge difference to clean them up. You know, the heels had all sorts of sort of dirt and grime and grass, sort of green stains and all sorts to them. So it's made a huge improvement upon them, and they certainly are a great deal whiter again, which is the main purpose of what we're doing, really, is reviving the shoe. Not only are we obviously restoring and repairing the area that has obviously been dog chewed so that it is virtually invisible again, what we wanted to also do was to clean the shoes up so that they were all cleaned up. So this is the leather prep that we're going to use here, and we're just going to wipe over the area very, very gently, just so that we can remove a small amount of surface colour. Purpose for removing the small amount of surface colour is so that we can actually get the new colour to adhere on there properly. We do need to take some of that old colour off so that the new colour can go on and bond properly. Once we've obviously got it all cleaned over with the leather prep, we'll probably begin like sanding and filling processes and stuff like that, depending on what we sort of feel it looks like. You know, we need to sort of make sure that it's right for the filling process, and that the back of the shoe is perfectly held tight in position, ready for us to do any sort of filler work or sanding work to the back of them. So we're going to be sort of almost ready for the next sort of stages there now. We're just sort of trying to wipe it over and dry it off more than anything. And cleaning down the shoe in the LV area so that we can then start getting all of that masked up. Ready for when we do start painting and things like that. We'd obviously need to get all that masked up so that when we do start applying the paint, we're not going to be getting any paint onto the LV pattern or the white sole area, which is what we don't want to do, is to get paint on those areas. We're actually going to paint this by hand rather than spraying it, because obviously we don't have any spraying equipment here in SEMA. So we're just doing everything as best as we possibly can by hand with what we've got, which is just the basic, you know, it's the leather shoe repair kit, colour dye repair kit. So we've got sort of limited resources of what we've got. You know, we don't have, you know, with this being quite badly eaten, I mean, ideally you wanted to sort of hold it in place with clamps and things, which we didn't have. So we sort of obviously did that with all of the tape, as you could clearly see. So that's the black heavy filler, as you can clearly see. That's what we're going to use next to apply to the shoes. So we're going to use the little sort of like glue spatula, filler spatula, and we're just going to apply very small amounts into the back of the shoe there to fill up any gaps, because obviously it had been chewed, it had been eaten, and it was quite bad. It was literally hanging on by a thread, was the back end of the shoe. So we've got to be very, it was a very delicate area. So we are going to end up with some damage, but the main aim is to make that damage as invisible as possible. We're trying to get the filler in there. You don't want to apply thick amounts of filler, just small, thin amounts of filler, drying and sanding between each process if necessary, just to make sure that it is cured and bonded on the underside before you end up putting it on too thick and it's not fully cured or anything like that. Just make sure that it is fully bonded on that, it's fully cured and bonded before you start applying more layers. That's the key to the fillers. Whether it's heavy filler or flexi filler, no matter what it is, just make sure that it's thin layers that you're applying. Certainly looking a lot better now that we've got the heavy filler in there, that's for sure. We've obviously got to allow that to dry. So once that's obviously fully dried, we're able to obviously then either apply more of the heavy filler, or we'll go on to sort of stages of like sanding and stuff like that, just depending what it's like. We're now going to start masking up the actual shoe itself, ready to start doing the work that we need to do, which is obviously sanding. So we want to mask up those areas that we do not want to affect, so that they're masked up properly, so that when we sand, we're not going to create any damage to any other sort of unnecessary areas of the actual shoe itself, of these Louis Vuitton shoes. Get all the soles masked up. They're obviously white, so that when we're sponging on the black paints, with them being a very high quality, strong pigmentation, they can actually stain white and other areas if you do not mask up properly. So ensure that your job is properly and fully masked up. Is the only way you can really sort of do it, to get it fully masked up. Again, we're using the blue vehicle detailer's tape. It's a 3M tape, and that's exactly what we're using here to get it all covered up properly. Again, the beauty of this is it's quite easy to cut it, shape it, to get it into position really nicely, so that we're not getting any dye coming through where we're going to be colouring onto the other parts that aren't coloured. So the actual blue tape itself is it's a 3M tape, and it's a Scotch tape, and the actual reference number on this blue tape is 3434. That is the blue detailer's tape, the 3M Scotch tape. 3434 is the actual reference number, and it's a really good quality low-tech tape. So that's what, obviously with it being low-tech, you don't want it to, when we heat it up, when we're drying the colour, what you don't want to happen is to get glue transfer, sticking and bonding to the shoe, because that will actually create an even bigger problem than what we had previously, because it'll make it very difficult to get all that off the shoe itself without actually creating any damage to the other areas that it's got onto. So we need to ensure that it is, every area is covered, and we use the correct tape so that we do not end up creating further damage down the line. It's just a matter of going through and getting everything really taped up so that we can start the next stages. So that is the black leather colorant. We've obviously applied the filler, as you can see. We're now going to apply some of the black colorant. We may do a little bit of sanding. It just depends, what it's like once the colorant has been applied. It may be necessary, it might be that we just don't need to do any sanding at all, but that it's come out nice and smooth. We're just stippling the colour on. If you wipe it on, you're going to end up with like sort of streak lines where you've wiped it. So that's, you obviously don't want to do that. You could easily spray this with a very small airbrush if you wanted to. Something like a Pash airbrush or similar, or Iwata or something like that, you know, there'd be, you know, a perfect sort of airbrush to spray with. So I mean, there's plenty of different makes out there, you know, I mean, Badger, airbrush, but I mean, we use the Pash quite a fair bit. It's a very good, very reliable airbrush, and we find it quite successful for us, to be fair. But with this particular one, we're actually spraying we're actually sponging the colour on, and we're going to be sponging the lacquer on as well. So we're not going to be actually applying any colour with a spray gun. We're going to be sponging all of this on, you know, whether it be the lacquer or it's this leather colorant. We will be obviously applying all of it by hand application with the sponge. And it's just a matter of building the colours up. We're probably going to get about 3 or 4 coats on there, something like that, drying between each coat. So as you can see here, it's now all nicely done. This is your lacquer. This is a gloss and a matte. So we obviously want to, you know, mix these together equally to create a satin finish on the surface. If you want a satin, if you wanted it to be a slightly matter finish than the satin, then you obviously wouldn't add as much matte as you would do. You wouldn't add as much satin into the matte as you would do normally, obviously, because normally you'd add it 50-50. If you wanted to create a satin, if you'd add the gloss, into the matte, you create a satin by adding the gloss in at 50-50, and that would create a satin. So if you don't want it to be a satin and you want it to be just slightly duller than a satin, then obviously, you know, maybe try a like a 70-30 mix, 70% matte, 30% gloss going in there. And once you've got that all mixed up nicely, again, we're going to sponge apply this. So we need to apply the product to the sponge. And with this particular, it's a little bit different. You can almost stipple this on. So because it's a very clear liquid, it's not going to leave streaks in there if you wipe this on. The initial sort of reason for doing this is to just get the initial bit of colour on there so that it seals it and then stops the colour coming off. So, you know, a few applications again is going to do that, and it's going to build up that barrier of protection with that clear coat lacquer, so that once it's dried, you know, no more colour will be coming off these Louis Vuitton shoes, and it will give them a nice waterproof layer as well on the back end there, which will help sort of protect the repair and the shoes for many years to come. So we're now sort of stippling this on across the back of the shoe. If you get like little bubbles on there, don't worry about those, just leave them. Do not force dry them, because they will pop and become little tiny craters for you. So just leave them to naturally dry out, or use cold air to disperse those little bubbles. So it's important you either let them dry naturally or you use cold air to disperse them. Because if you use warm air, you're going to sort of, you know, pop them too quickly and create a bigger problem than what you had previously. It's going to give it like a rough finish on the surface if you're not careful. If you're to, you know, pop those bubbles that the lacquer has created, the, you know, top coat sealer. But it's a very good, very durable top coat sealer as well. So it's going to give you a lot of protection for the surface of these shoes. You have to just excuse it there. I just slightly went out of the picture. I didn't realise I'd gone out of the picture. So we're applying another coat here now. Again, you can wipe it on at this stage and stipple. With this particular one, when you wipe it on, as long as you do it carefully, you're not going to get any streak lines in this whatsoever. Whereas with the colorant that went on, with it being a paint, and obviously it's a lot thicker than the clear coat lacquer, you could quite easily create like streaks in the paint if you rub it on. So again, with the paint, you need to get it stippled on there so that you get that nice sort of pattern effect going onto the surface of the item. So it almost resembles a little bit like leather, really, to be fair. Once you've obviously got it dry, we can then obviously go back to the next stages of maybe lightly sanding and stuff like that. So we are actually drying it at the moment with a hairdryer. I know you can't hear it, but we are actually drying it with a hairdryer. We took the noise out because it was quite loud on the video for that particular one, so we actually reduced took out the noise of the hairdryer. But it's a matter of just getting it dry Once it's all dry, we can then see whether we need to actually apply any more clear coat to it, or if we need to actually do any sanding sort of work to the actual shoe itself. And if there is, we can sort of do that sanding quite well at that stage. And if it needs any more filler, then we can obviously sand and put filler, and then more colour, and then more sealer again. So I mean, it's a very, very simple sort of 3-stage process. It's, you know, it's prep it, colour it, seal it, and the job is done when you're doing sort of leather repairs, no matter whether it's on a pair of shoes like this, these Louis Vuitton shoes, or if it's a handbag, a leather jacket, car seat, boat, plane. It doesn't really particularly matter.